This episode is brought to you by Sheeta and
Nikki
from Real Conversations with Sheeta and Nikki podcast. Creating quality episodes takes plenty of time, energy, and can be quite costly. If you have gained value in our podcast and would like to support us, please consider being a subscriber to our show.
By becoming a monthly subscriber, you will have access to all episodes, exclusive content, giveaways, and podcast merchandise. You will even have an opportunity to be shouted out on an upcoming episode. We have goals for our podcast, and to help us achieve those goals, sign up to be a monthly subscriber by clicking the link in our bio and click on the subscribe to our podcast link. Now let's get into today's episode.
Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Clark, and I'm the principal consultant at SOAR Fundraising Consulting. And you are listening to Real Conversations with Sheeta and Nikki, and I am today's featured guest. Now let's get into it.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for tuning into another episode of Real Conversations with Sheeta and
Nikki.
And today's special guest is Teresa Clark. She is an owner of SOAR Fundraising Consulting. We wanted to bring Teresa on today's show to talk about the importance of fundraising, to give insight on how fundraising works behind the scenes, and for our listeners that are business owners, give them a perspective on how they may incorporate fundraising in their own business.
Teresa has knowledgeable skills and insight in the area of fundraising. She has been fundraising for over 17 years. So with that being said, Teresa, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yes. So do you kind of want to get a little bit into what made you start the company, the importance of fundraising? Because most people, we just think about fundraising like, okay, let me, put something here just to donate to this cause, just to kind of give people an insight exactly what is fundraising and how you came about starting your company.
Yeah, well, I would love to do that. I'll give you a little bit of background, first of all, how I got into fundraising. A friend of mine brought me to a concert for a nonprofit organization that focuses on diversity in classical music. She knew I liked classical music. I played the violin as a kid. And there I was sitting at this concert, and I was looking at these young Black and Latino string players who sounded like fully professional musicians at the age of like 13, 14, and 15. And as I looked through the program, I saw, all the individuals and companies that made it possible for this concert to be. I had never heard of this organization. It was just so amazing to me. And I thought, wow, I saw Target there. And I thought, wow, so many other companies should be in there. And then as things worked out, about a year later, that organization had a job opening. And I went after it. It was actually on the programming side of things, which is more working with the participants and parents and things like that. But the leaders saw my interest in just the fundraising aspect. And about a couple months later, they said, come on over here to raising money. Raising money really is just about connecting the people who care about a cause with that cause and showing them the impact that they can make by giving their financial support. I've been lucky enough to be involved in fundraising, not only at that organization, that nonprofit arts organization, but in higher education at my alma mater, the University of Michigan. I've raised money for health. I've supported boards in doing this work. And so what made me want to start SOAR was just the realization that most people, when they're in fundraising, they don't have the support that they need. Often there are the one person in their organization who's responsible for fundraising, or they have these really big goals, but they really don't know how to wrap their arms around them. And so I started with a little bit of board support, and then I started to create low-cost tools that would really help people analyze and make their fundraising more systematized versus just sort of need and then running to see where can we find this money. But really looking at how do you create the systems, how do you look at all of your potential options to engage people, and then bring them into a system and a process that feels very natural, that they would want to donate, and that you can just continue to grow those relationships. So that's why I started SOAR in a long-winded way, but that was kind of the journey.
Awesome. That's awesome. Now, is it just you that's running the company, or do you have more employees that's helping you along with this?
It's myself as the principal. I have 2 other people part-time who do support, with editing, things like that. So when I'm doing a project, I learn to avoid those things that make me try to be a perfectionist. And if you've ever used Canva or anything like that, you know the pain. And so I have support in that way.
Okay, great. So far as with fundraising, I liked what you said about it important that people want to give and not necessarily make it feel as though it's a task to give.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other different strategies that you use to help people to raise the funds?
Sure. One of the things that I always talk about in my day job, I manage a team, and I always talk about this power of agreement, that when you're working with people, getting an understanding of what they truly want and getting the yes and the pre-yes before you actually ask them for money. So the way that can play out is, say you have Mr. and Mrs. Smith and you would like to engage them in a program that you're running. Ask them, is it okay that you come and share information about that program? Be very transparent about what you plan to do. If you plan to ask for a gift, always say, is it okay if I come and talk to you about making a gift? Never do you want your people to be surprised at oh my goodness, just ambush me. We're having coffee, and next thing you know, they're asking me for $5,000. So I often talk about this power of agreement. Can I come talk to you? Sure. Okay. Now we're talking. Is it okay if I follow up with you on some programs, some opportunities within this thing that we're doing? Sure. Okay. And then you're really working with them, working alongside them to help them make the decisions that they would make if they knew more about the work that you're doing. So I would say that's a big one.
Yeah, that's great.
So when you say fundraising, is it just monetary fundraising, or is there other types of fundraising that's out there?
Well, I am specifically working in the nonprofit space. Okay. Within nonprofit fundraising, you could be raising money for financial support, in-kind donations. Where I currently work, it's a health organization. We may reach out to a company that makes, stethoscopes, or who makes lab equipment, to say, hey, would you be willing to donate some of that equipment to our cause? And that company can then write that off. Or it could be services. If you are a finance person and our board needs someone to look over finances and help us in that area, hey, would you donate your services and your time?
Right.
So it can work in a variety of ways.
Yeah, so it can work in monetary way and maybe mentoring, offering a skill.
Absolutely.
To learn, to offer their skill so that someone else can learn what their skills are.
Yes.
Yeah. And then is fundraising more of a temporary thing? Is it a short term, or is this fundraising, can it be something that's ongoing?
It can be both. You have those long-term projects that you raise money for. If you're familiar with the term endowment, some organizations look to raise money that they can use forever. There are certain contributors who want to, make that long-term commitment to say, hey, I'll give you a $5 million endowment. You would operate off of 5% of that every year. And it just continues to grow and make an impact. Yeah. There are those events, typically where maybe you're raising money for something special you're doing that year. And this event is July. So we're only, we're going to run this fundraising program from January to July. So It can really depend. I always suggest thinking very, very long term when you're working with especially individual contributors, because there can sometimes be a tendency to run to people and see them only as like a resource. Like, oh, we have this need. I'm going to run to them and say, hey, can you give me $100? But when you look at that long-term relationship with your organization, I think you make better, wiser decisions, that you don't sort of like run to them just with the needs, that you're also engaging them and letting them know what's happening throughout the program year, inviting them to events, that sort of that serve, and then sell mentality is something that I also talk about often, that, the amount of times you reach out to your people, hopefully 2 times, is just to say, hey, how are you doing? Let me tell you about something that's going on. Let me thank you again. And then that one is saying, hey, what can you do? Can you give another gift? Would you meet with me? Things like that.
Yeah. So are there like certain strategies, I guess, you use to build relationships with these other companies to make it more of a long-term relationship? Yeah,
I think really looking at alignment, with institutions, that can be a company or a foundation that is working in your space. Really making sure that they align. There's no sense in me. There's a joke in fundraising, everybody, and it used to be more so back in the day, that everybody, you're fundraising and it's like, oh, who knows Oprah? Like Oprah doesn't care about your swing set that you want to build in the back of, church. So it's really about figuring out who cares about your project, reaching out to them and connecting them in a meaningful way.
Yeah, that is important. That is very important.
Yeah. So are there any myths or misconceptions that you have found it with being in the field of fundraising?
Yes. The myth is that we are like magicians, and that your need automatically, just find the money, can't you find a grant for that? Or can't you find, someone who wants to put a fountain in the middle of the, garden, or, things like that. Like, we're not magicians. We can cultivate individuals the way we know we should. We can look for them. We can look at peer organizations and see who is funding them, reach out to them. We can look at who are the recipients of our services, who cares about it, who are the parents, reach out to them. We can do all those things, but we cannot reach in their pocket and take the money out, and we cannot magically make a grant appear. So that would be a myth and a misconception.
Yes, definitely. So kind of talking about SOAR here. So are there any particular fields that you're raising, that you help people raise with SOAR, or is it just a vast amount of everything, no matter what they're trying to raise funds for?
Well, at SOAR, and I should back up to talk a little bit about the company name. It's interesting. I got the vision for SOAR years ago. I've been doing consulting just, sort of on my own name for years and years. And like, as you look up and you see birds, they often work together. They are, working in relationship. And so when I created SOAR, it really was about helping people build those same types of synergies. And fundraising, it doesn't matter what you're raising money for, the same principles sort of apply. Very rarely can you go far alone. If you're doing a big project, you're going to need support. You're going to need volunteers. You're going to need the support of your board. You're going to need a good base of supporters that you can already go to, and then help grow it from there. And so that is sort of what I work on. My logo, there's, these birds flying in an arrow, and one is the red bird who's in the back. That is actually the fundraiser in the story. To me, that person is kind of like pushing the group from the back, because this ultimately is not their, it's not their organization. That money is not for them. This money is for the greater cause that these people all care about. And so they're pushing, from behind. And so it's kind of the philosophy of the company. The tools that I create are mostly for those solo flyers who are sort of out here in their office alone, but yet they need to be able to reach out and know who to engage and how to engage them to make that group, even though there might not be any other employees involved. So, I kind of, it's a sort of a one-stop shop. It can be the tools that you need, or if you want that one-on-one coaching or group coaching for you and your board, we also do that as well.
Okay.
And what are some things that because I know we talked about like the myths and misconceptions of fundraising. So I know there can be like challenges a lot of times that you have to overcome, but what really keeps you motivated to keep working in this field of fundraising?
Definitely the impact. Yeah. Like really, that is what it is. Throughout this whole COVID, pandemic, I felt thankful that like what the work that I'm doing actually is helping people, that it's a greater cause. And so I can have, if I'm having a rough day, I can reach out to someone who has been the recipient of our services and just, who also has maybe given too. So I'm calling them to say, hey, thank you so much for supporting this cause. And then just to hear their stories about how their lives have been changed and how, they will say things like, oh, I'm going to support you until I die. Like that is a shot in the arm, a boost of adrenaline that will keep you going. So, I think for those fundraisers who you have to have some kind of passion about the work you do, or you will get burned out.
Right.
Yeah. I agree. That's one thing that we always talk about here on the show is following your passion.
Yeah.
If you follow your passion, it won't feel like a job or such a task.
Right.
You'll actually enjoy what you do.
So true. So true. And in fundraising, there's so many no's. There's this rejection everywhere to get to that yes, that if you're not passionate about it, it will be very hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess I never thought about that either, because a lot of times, like, so many times when you will get that no, you do have to still keep going and pushing. That one yes can open up the door for so many other opportunities. That one person that gives, they may say, hey, I have someone that, I know that would also like to give for this cause, or to this organization. So, you got to keep pushing and striving.
Yeah. I think it starts with just believing in yourself that you can do it.
Yeah.
Too. That's very true. Very true.
Yeah.
So if it's someone that's interested in starting their own fundraising business, or they want to get more into fundraising, what are some tips or advice that you would give that person that's interested in beginning, starting their own fundraising or is interested in fundraising?
Yeah, someone who wants to begin fundraising, I would say definitely get some books. There's not, in most cases, there are a few programs now, but there's nowhere that you go to learn or get a fundraising degree, but it takes skill. You can't, it's I always say it's both an art, and a science. There's the people skills, there's the, just knowing who you're talking to, what they're interested in, what not to say, what to say. And then there's also the science part. If you're looking at your organization has 50 contributors to date, looking at that list to see, how do I segment these people so that I can develop the appropriate plans to reach out to them, to make sure I'm meeting with them, to make sure I'm engaging them, to maximize that 50 so that next year it's 100 and next year after that it's 150. So I would say get some books, get a mentor, ask questions, really engage with the people in your organization who actually do the work, so that what it is that you're out here promoting. So often fundraisers think the program runs one way, but the people who run it will say, oh no, we don't do camp twice a week, we do it once a week, and we the reason why we do it is this. So you really have to tap into what was actually happening. And then, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to get out there and just ask. They're individuals who are, philanthropic, which just means that they are inclined to give to people, who will meet with you regardless. Just ask for the meeting. Don't be afraid that they will say no. ask for the meeting. And if they, if you're nervous, role play. Role playing is so important before you go out on these major calls. And anything is major. If you're starting, every conversation could make a critical difference and like be a turning point in your fundraising, because if your board member knows someone, at the, X Foundation, and they can get you a meeting or, whatever it might be, like that can change everything. So, study and be prepared.
Yeah.
Good. Definitely.
You offer certain services for people that want to get into fundraising, and if so, what are those services that you do offer?
Yes. So I offer training. I do weekend boot camps that are really designed, for that person who is working in the field but wants to be able to come together and strategize on like the actual work that they're doing. And so I found that those have been very, very helpful, especially for those individuals who are working alone as far as strategy. They have some board member support, but they are the primary person responsible for creating the strategies and making the goals. So I do those weekend boot camps. I also have a curriculum that I developed, a 9-month curriculum that takes an individual who is just starting out primarily, or someone who just wants to, have all the fundamentals, but it takes you from, A to Z. What is a foundation? What's the difference between a corporate foundation and a family foundation? How do you, what's a, letter of inquiry? How do you make an introduction to a foundation? All those things, grant writing, how to write your pitch, all of that. So it's very comprehensive. That is that 9-month curriculum. It's an investment, but when you're done, you definitely have a good foundation. And then I also have just written tools. So if you just want to be the DIY fundraiser, say, okay, give me, what's my plan for my annual appeal? So many times nonprofits don't take advantage of that year-end giving. They're not doing an annual appeal. And so just give me your toolkit of how I write it, what kind of things I should include in that, and I'll do it myself. So, hey, you can order my toolkits that way too.
Oh, right.
Wow, that's great.
That is.
Thank you.
Yes, that's very good for someone that wants to start out fundraising. It definitely sounds like you have the tools to help guide that person that wants to really get into fundraising. That's great. Did anything really motivate you to create those tools? Like, were you seeing maybe a gap in fundraising and you wanted to fill that gap, so you kind of created your own tools to get out there to other people?
I was seeing that gap. As I mentioned, I have a team and I'm fairly new as their manager. It's just been a couple of years, and I saw the need for, okay, how do you, if you're having a visit with someone, what are the things that you want to prepare? What are the questions you want to know? What do you want to know about them? Who else they give to? They have kids in college. And so just in creating some of those tools, and in some previous experiences, I just knew when there is something that you like, there's nothing out here, then why not create it?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's great. So you work with individuals as well as companies too?
Yes, the whole range. So, all the philanthropic partners that you think of, foundations, corporations, also clubs and organizations. That's also sometimes an overlooked constituency. So who are the clubs that are already organized who would care about your cause, and making relationships with them? Often they give contributions every year, and we'll be happy to give you, $500, $1,000 of that. Individuals, both at the annual giving, which is your $25, $50, $100, and major giving all the way up to, $5,000, $25,000. Events, all of that is under my purview, and I've had extensive experience with it.
That's great. So SOAR will work with individuals from smaller dollar amounts all the way up to, whatever it may be. So
yes, I say it. The principles apply no matter what you're trying to do. The same principles apply.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. I think they don't talk about I don't hear about fundraising that much. Like I know I see like the Girl Scout cookies fundraising,
Yes.
but as far as like within a company, or we don't talk about fundraising, and that's a very important financial avenue people can explore, and I just don't think that it's really talked about as much, or people don't know that that's an option for their company. Yes. Or individual person even knows that that's an option for financially, to help with their company, or if they're trying to start up a business or whatever their goal is. I feel like it's not talked about as much. So I really do appreciate you just offering the services that you have, and just talking about fundraising today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I think that the more, especially those women-led and people of color-led organizations can get their piece of this pie that's out here, right. It will just help communities be better served. So it's my pleasure. And if I can never come back and talk about anything in particular, please don't hesitate to let me know.
Yeah, definitely. I love it.
So before we go, I wanted to ask you really quick, what is your future goals for SOAR looks like?
Yes, my future goals, glad you asked that. I would love to publish manuals. My 9-month curriculum is focused on that, like one-on-one. We do Zoom unless you're local, but I would love to publish each of those modules like as a manual that could be used for those new fundraisers who, often you don't have the resources to do a one-on-one coaching, but you could, take a weekend and process one of those manuals, because I believe that having the good foundation just sets you up for success. You don't get discouraged. You don't get burnt out. Sometimes there are so many good people who could be great fundraisers, but they don't get the skills and training. And so they end up getting out of the field and doing something else. I just think that's a disservice to the nonprofits who could benefit from them being ambassadors for them. I would love to do, academies where there's, hundreds of people coming in and getting some sort of certification. Like, there's not a unified program necessarily. There's the CFRE, which is for certified fundraisers. But if you're not necessarily trying to go to that full length, but you want to have a good foundation to be able to create opportunities like that for people. So it's kind of how I see it in the future.
Yeah, that's great. That is so great.
I think it's awesome what you're doing and being able to come out and talk about the different positive features of fundraising and how other people can incorporate it into their company or their business. And I think, like I said before, I think it needs to be talked about more so people know that this is another stream of income that they could have for their business. So I really do. I feel like it needs to be talked about more, and I really do appreciate your services and the things that you're offering.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah. So, Teresa, if people wanted to contact you and get consultation through your company, what are some ways that they can reach out to you?
Yep. The easiest way is on Instagram. You can find me at SOAR Fundraising Consulting. You can also look for me on LinkedIn under Teresa Clark, or email me. I love emails, just to, if you even like a little short question or, want a conversation, I'm always open to that. I always say I'm never too busy for that 5-minute, hey, this is just, you kind of run this by you. You can email me at Teresa, which is TERESA .m.g.clark, which is CLARK @gmail.com.
Great. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate you.
Yes. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Much success on your podcast.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. So with that being said, I wanted to do the takeaway, which is nothing is impossible. The word itself says, I'm possible. And that is from Audrey Hepburn.
Yes, I like that statement.
Yeah.
So we just, again, want to thank our guest, Teresa Clark from SOAR Fundraising Consultant, for coming on today's episode. We really gained a lot of value from her today. So we just want to thank Teresa. And then we also just want to thank our listeners for all the positive support and feedback. We hope that each episode that we do, that you all are gaining value on the episodes. So we just want to thank our listeners for the positive support, the positive feedback. Receive all of it, and we thank you all for it. If you want to be featured on our upcoming episode, please email us or contact us on Instagram at realconversations21, or you can email us directly at realconversations21@gmail.com. And thanks again, everyone, for listening to another episode of Sheeta and
Nikki. Bye. Hi, everyone. This is Nikki
and Sheeta
from Real Conversations with Sheeta and Nikki. I wanted to talk with you about the importance of having a morning routine. Did you know, according to a poll conducted by a website named The Sleep Judge, the poll consisted of more than 1,000 participants. Data found that individuals who stuck to a morning routine earn more than a whopping $12,000 more per year than those who have a casual approach to the morning.
Having a morning routine has shown to increase energy and productivity, as well as having better focus and improved happiness. Having a morning routine is not about perfection, but about consistency. There will be days when your morning routine will be thrown off or simply can't be completed that day, and that's okay. That's why we suggest habit nest journals.
Habit nest journals take you day by day with numbered pages and words of encouragement and tips for each day. Habit nest journals help you set a morning routine that's customizable for each individual's personal needs. Please click the link in our bio for your habit nest journal today.